morning, everyone. It's good to see all of you today. Welcome to another new thing. Let me get this right. Move it this way. No, I made it worse. There we go. That's all messed up. Perfect. Anyway, good morning, everyone. It's good to see all of you here for our new thing. Today we're going to be getting into some politics, which is a joy for me. It really is deep down, but always a fun thing to do. But one of the things I wanted to talk about first, before we get into that, because it's all related to Holy Week when it comes down to it, is I wanted to, because it's Maundy Thursday, I wanted to do something like with a Maundy Thursday focus. And so I wanted to talk about the law, especially the Old Testament law, because obviously on Maundy Thursday is the day that we remember Jesus's mandatum, his command, right? The new command he gives to love one another as I have loved you. It's where it gets its name from. And I think that when we think of commands, we don't tend to like them very much. And especially when we think of the law in the Old Testament, a lot of Christians, maybe not you, but a lot of Christians tend to denigrate it or look down on it. And I think this is because we have sometimes skewed readings from the New Testament. I think one of the most important things that Jesus says is he says, I have not come to abolish the law, but to fulfill it. And how that's sorted out is, there's a lot there for theologians to parse through and for us to kind of work with. But I wanted to just think about it because I was reading a book by Dallas Willard just the other day, a Christian philosopher, and in it, he talks about what a blessing the law is. And it's usually not the way we're usually used to hearing it. I mean, a lot of us have echoes of Paul's language, right? Where he talks as the law as a curse to us. But when Paul says this in Galatians and stuff like that, he's not calling the law evil or bad. He's more talking about the human condition and the way it's viewed. Usually, though, when we think about it, like we just think that's what it means, right? That the Old Testament laws are a curse and they're bad and that's evil. But actually, they're a good thing. And I wanted to show this, or at least remind ourselves of this, because this is a constant theme throughout the Old Testament. And this sets up our hearts for how we treat Jesus' commandments in the New Testament as well, right? Because He's God. He's giving us the same ones in the Old Testament as he's giving us in the New. Things might change under the new covenant, right? What the observation of these laws looks like. In a lot of cases, they get a lot more strict in the new covenant. But that we can parse that out maybe in a future video or something. But I wanted to look at Psalm 119, which is a great psalm. It's very long. So if you ever read it, you're going to see that it's long, because each section of it is, you'll notice here how it says Aleph. It has this character right here. That's the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and it's Aleph. And so each of the sections it's an acrostic, basically. Now, not an acrostic, I guess, because usually that spells out something too, but like each letter of these stanzas begins with that letter. So Aleph, Beit, Gimel, Dalet, stuff like that. And so we're just going to look at verses 1 through 8 because this is what it's about. But this whole thing is really actually about the law. So if you want to see a deep dive into a praise for the law and what God has given us through it, like Psalm 119 is great for that. But let's look at the Aleph part. Blessed are those whose ways are blameless, who walk according to the law of the Lord. Blessed are those who keep his statutes and seek him with all their heart. They do no wrong, but follow his ways. You have laid down precepts that are to be fully obeyed. Oh, that my ways were steadfast in obeying your decrees. Then I would not be put to shame when I consider all your commands. I will praise you with an upright heart as I learn your righteous laws. I will obey your decrees. Do not utterly forsake me. So this is a big theme throughout all of Psalm 119. Very interesting piece of poetry or piece of music. And I think it's like, this is not how we usually see God's commands. I don't think this is how we view them a lot of the time. And I think the reason that is because a lot of people don't like rules, or we see it's usually contrasted, right? You have law and gospel. kind of two different sides, right? The law is the bad stuff, the gospel is the good stuff, right? And I think actually here, if you look at it in terms of the people at the time and what God is communicating and seeing it through that lens, it gives you a lot better of appreciation for what God is doing both in the Old Testament and the New Testament. So in the Old Testament times, right, no other group of people had divinities that were, of course they didn't exist, but like that they believed had any real interest in kind of the everyday aspect of their life, right? That it was just very much like a playoff situation. But here in Psalm 119, we have God, the author praising God for giving the law. And that's because the law is seen as a blessing, right? The law is seen as God's way of showing his care for his people, reminding them of the things he has done in the past, and giving them the way to live, right? Helping them figure that out without making them just, allowing them to just do whatever they want, right? And this is why we usually, when we think of the law, you see theologians talk about it. One of the things that they talk about is they will mention that there are sometimes 2 or 3, depending on who you are, uses of the law, right? And so the law serves different things. Sometimes it tells us what sin is. It tells us what not to do. And it also tells us what to do. Like there's positive use of the law in the sense of like there's when it says not to do something, you can extrapolate that into to say what you should do. I mean, just last week, we did a section of the Westminster Longer Catechism, and if you remember, in church we did this. And if you remember in that, I had us not read the section about what the commandment condemns, right? Thou shalt not steal. But actually, I had us read a section that they have where it's like the positive view of the law, where it's like, well, if the law says we cannot steal, then this is how we are supposed to live our lives, right? Being upright, paying people fair wages, things like that. So it's just, there's a lot of ways that the law is a blessing, which we usually do not understand. And we want to have the same mindset that the writer of Psalm 119 has, where we view the commands of God as being a blessing, not a curse, because we understand what the negative part of the law is for Paul and for others is what humans do to it, right? Because humans think that the blessing isn't God giving us the law and his graciousness toward us. The blessing is the law itself because we can make sure that we follow it to a T and even add things to it to make sure that we're super righteous, right? Paul is saying, no, that is not what the law is for. That is why Jesus says, I'm not here to abolish it, but I've come to fulfill it. Because through what Jesus does, we are fulfilled. Like the law is fulfilled through the cross, right? That we are able to keep it perfectly, not because we do anything, but because he did something, and therefore we're able to just enjoy the law for what it is, right? We don't have to worry about being so enamored and over the top with it that we just make up stuff on to make ourselves more righteous and more holy, right? So I think that's really important to remember on Maundy Thursday when we're talking about getting a new commandment from Jesus, because maybe when we hear this, we'll go, well, we have to love one another as Christ loved us, and that means that we have to do X, Y, Z, and that means that's, maybe we can even love people more or something like that, right? People will get this idea into their heads. Even if they don't say it that way, that's what they believe. So I thought it was important to talk about that on Maundy Thursday. So now let's move into something stupid. How about we do that? How about we move into something stupid? So for us today, I have this video that I have gotten, and it's from it's from a video of Marjorie Taylor Greene, and as you know, this week is something that is pretty substantial in American politics because Trump had to go to an indictment, right? I'm sure unless you've lived under a rock, you've heard about this. And if you haven't heard and you've been living under a rock, get back under there. It's good for you. So anyway, I have this video of her giving an interview, and it's like funny that it happens right when we're doing Holy Week, because it just all flows together in such a nice little bow. So Let me pull this up for us, and we can do this. All right. So let's listen to what she has to tell us this morning.
Some of the most incredible people in history being arrested today. Nelson Mandela was arrested, served time in prison. Jesus was arrested and murdered by the Roman government. There have been many people throughout history that have been arrested and persecuted by radical, corrupt governments. And it's beginning today in New York City. And I just can't believe it's happening, but I'll always support him. He's done nothing wrong.
All right. So, I'll be honest with all of you, I'm not an expert on apartheid South Africa, so I'm not going to comment on whether or not Nelson Mandela is a good comparison to Trump. My gut feeling is that he's not. And I want to be clear when I'm talking about this, that this isn't a political thing. I really don't have much of an interest in wading into whatever debate is going on, all the different types of it that's going on around this thing. What I really wanted to bring up, obviously, was this appeal or similar statement where she made, about Nelson Mandela to Jesus, right? Comparing Trump to Jesus in the sense that he was unjustly brought to trial and condemned. And she's saying, well, that's the same thing with ex-President Trump, right? He was condemned, or he's being brought to trial and he's going to be unjustly condemned and all these other types of things. And have there been many people throughout the ages who have been punished for things they didn't do? Absolutely. Right? But none of them are Jesus. Right? None of them are Jesus. What actually got me started on this was not seeing this video, but actually this image popped up on my not my Facebook, my Twitter. And I actually think that, to be fair, I think that this has to be what we like to call in the business a false flag or a psyop. And all that means is that people make something up to make someone else look bad or to draw attention to something because, if you look at this, right, it says the Romans freed a murderer but condemned an innocent man. Alvin Bragg is no different than Pontius Pilate. Alvin Bragg is the guy who's bringing the charge against Trump, in case you don't know. And this has to, I saw this and I went, this is definitely one of those things that I could see someone making to spread and see how many people who aren't really that aware politically, religiously, whatever, or, maybe their politics are their God, take this and just spread it and put it everywhere because, there's several spelling errors. Obviously, it's it's a provocative thing to do, right, to compare Trump to Jesus, although I saw this and then I saw the Marjorie Taylor Greene thing, so it was just kind of wow, this is going around, isn't it? And there's spelling errors, the different thing, and they spell Pontius Pilate wrong. They spell Pontius Pilate like someone on a plane. So I think that this is probably fake, but I thought it was pretty funny. None of this stuff insults me. I just think it's funny when this type of stuff happens. But I'm sure people did share this as not a joke, as a serious thing. And so I wanted to talk about what makes Jesus different, right? Well, obviously the biggest difference between Jesus and not just Donald Trump, but everyone, is that Jesus lived a completely sinless life. Well, so someone might be sentenced to a crime that they are innocent of. It does not mean that they were totally innocent in every aspect of their lives. And so I think that anytime we make a comparison, we just shouldn't. We just shouldn't make a comparison with Jesus, right? One of my favorite paintings is this painting. It's called Ecce Homo, which in Latin means this is the man, or here, behold the man, is actually what behold the man in Latin. And we're going to read what biblical passage this is taken from. But it's this famous painting of Pilate presenting Christ before the people of Jerusalem, right? And I just think it's an interesting. I just think that stylistically, it's one of these epic biblical paintings, and I always love stuff like that, from the 1800s or something. But it's just an interesting painting because the focus is on Pilate, which is an interesting focus because normally we would think that maybe you would take it off Pilate and maybe put it on Christ. Christ is there, right? But he's off center. And you have the people in the crowd in the background who you can't really see. You can see some of their faces between the bars that are in the little railing before Pilate. But you really can't see that much. What you do see, you see Pilate's wife off to the side, who, according to Christian legend, later became a Christian and had a dream that, they shouldn't kill Jesus and things like that. And so, she's against this and these types of things. And so it's all that jazz. And so Pilate here is the center. And I think, and I don't know what the artist is trying to communicate. I can't get inside their head, but I think it's really interesting because when we think about Jesus being sentenced, I think we usually are very quick to identify maybe people who would be innocent, quote unquote, in the trial. And some people accuse the Gospels of trying to do this with Pilate, although I don't think they do. And so let's look at John 19, which is where this is from. It talks about Jesus being sentenced to be crucified. This is after he's come before Pilate. Then Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged. The soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head. They clothed him in a purple robe and went up to him again and again, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they slapped him in the face. So the Romans here are insulting him. Once more Pilate came out and said to the Jews gathered here, "Look, I am bringing him out to you to let you know that I find no basis of charge against him." When Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and purple robe, Pilate said to them, "Here's the man." Ecce Homo in the Greek, in the Latin translation of the Greek. I think in the Greek it's idou. So like, look, behold, idou, ho anthropos, I think, is the what it is. I can't remember it off the top of my head. As soon as the chief priests and their officials saw him, they shouted, "Crucify, crucify!" But Pilate answered, You take him and crucify him. As for me, I find no basis for a charge against him." The Jewish leaders insisted, "We have a law, and according to the law he must die because he claimed to be the Son of God." When Pilate heard this, he was even more afraid, and he went back inside the palace. "Where do you come from?" he asked Jesus, but Jesus gave him no answer. "Do you refuse to speak to me?" Pilate said. "Don't you realize I have power either to free you or crucify you?" Jesus answered, "You have no power over me if it was not given to you from above. Therefore, the one who handed me over to you is guilty of a greater sin." There he's talking about Judas, or he's talking about the people who are condemning him. From then on, Pilate tried to set Jesus free, but the Jewish leaders kept shouting, "If you let this man go, you are no friend of Caesar. Anyone who claims to be a king opposes Caesar." When Pilate heard this, he brought Jesus out and sat down on the judge's seat at a place known as the Stone Pavement, which in Aramaic is Gabbatha. It was the day of preparation of the Passover. It was about noon. "Here is your king," Pilate said to the Jews. But they shouted, take him away, crucify him." "Shall I crucify your king?" Pilate asked. "We have no king but Caesar," the chief priests answered. Finally, Pilate handed him over to them to be crucified. So you have famous section of the narrative, right? I mean, I'm sure that this is a big part of like Good Friday things. One of the things, I'll just keep this picture up because it's a nice picture and it reminds us of this, is when we talk about this, everyone in this passage misunderstands who Jesus is, right? Pilate understands that really he hasn't done anything that would merit him being crucified. But you'll notice that it also mentions that Pilate is afraid, right? Pilate is afraid of what the people are going to do. What this means in the time is that maybe the people will revolt. And if the people revolt, then the Romans have to show up. And when the Romans have to show up, then they're going to like level everything and kill a bunch of people. And really what that's going to do is it's negatively going to impact Pilate and his career, right? So, and of course, like maybe if he doesn't, they might storm his governor palace and kill him or something like that, right? You can imagine all sorts of scenarios. And so basically he's doing a calculus and he's saying, well, even if he's innocent, right? I'll maybe say this to wipe my conscience clean, but I'm still going to deliver him over to be killed. And I think that is a pretty strong condemnation of Pilate's own behavior, right? This is kind of like the sin of omission, right? You're not doing it, but like you're allowing it to happen and you're not really stopping it, and you know it's wrong, right? And so Pilate is committing that sin, right? So I don't believe that he's like this innocent character, and I don't think that the Gospels are trying to present that either. I think they're trying to present what happened. But you'll notice, right? How does Pilate introduce Jesus, right? Ecce Homo, behold the man. And I think that it's a really powerful, misunderstanding of who he is, and this is also on the Jewish leaders and the crowds, right? What do they say? What do they say? They say, he deserves to be killed because he's claimed to be the Son of God. Again, denying that really essential part of who Jesus is. So everyone here is denying exactly who Jesus is and what he says his mission is, right? And Jesus tells this to Pilate, right? He's like, listen, there's nothing that you have no authority over me. But Jesus is going through this for a purpose. And I think one of the things when we think about what people are comparing in this situation, and it'll be people on the right today, give it a few months, it'll be people on the left. So I'm not making this a left-right distinction. Although if you remember my sermons where I talked about how God hates Democrats and God hates Republicans, one of the things that is a problem for me with the Republican Party is they're very quick, that they being the RNC, the National Committee, but also lots of Republican candidates are very quick to use religious language kind of flippantly, and I think that was on display here. But it is not exclusive. But I think like one of the things is when we do that, right, we take Jesus and we denigrate what he has done when we compare it to things that are human. Even someone who is like a good, someone we would consider good, right? Like Marjorie Taylor Greene, apparently, considers Nelson Mandela good, is saying that Jesus is like Nelson Mandela, like a positive thing. Well, it might be positive in our view, right? But it actually does lower Christ to a lower position than it is, right? It actually says Ecce Homo, like behold the man, as in this guy is not God. This guy is just like a political figure or someone like we can use to have our own biases met. And of course, like I'm not saying they do this consciously, but I think you do it subconsciously when you allow this type of language to really take root. You end up just denying a really important part about Jesus and who he is, and also like what makes him different and why his sacrifice and his death is actually that, right? A sacrifice in order to bring us closer to God, right? To cover our hard-heartedness when it comes to following the laws and commands, and frees us to really live into that covenant relationship that we are supposed to have with God. So I think that this is a powerful thing to think about as we kind of head into Holy Week, right? Tonight we have Maundy Thursday service at 7:30, so if you're going to be around, join us for that. And of course on Easter Sunday we're going to have our Easter celebration. But just take time meditating over these verses and over these things, because this is kind of at the core, right? Where are you in this story? You might, a lot of us would like to think that we'd be there with Jesus, but at the end of the day, most of us, right, and the humanity is the crowd or the Romans, right? We're just the people who are willing to kind of sit by, either calling for his condemnation or allowing it to happen because of our own kind of selfish needs and ambitions. And at the end of the day, the Son of God is killed on the cross for us, all of us, and by all of us. And that's really important to remember. So I hope all of you guys have a wonderful rest of your Maundy Thursday. Hopefully I'll see you tonight, and I will check in with you guys next week before I go to the Far East, to the land of the rising sun. So I will see you guys next week for another new thing. Peace out.